on deck for today's masterclass. First and foremost, we'll get into formal intros in just a bit, but today we have Teri Long, VP of Global Enablement at CB Insights, as well as Pete Kazanjy, co-founder and CRO at Atrium. So we'll chat with these guys about salesy stuff in just a minute, but first let's talk summer highlights now that we're wrapping up. I know it's what no one wants to acknowledge, but let's go, Teri. Summer highlights. What you got for us?
Oh, I'm going to just say, and Pete knows this because we talk about it every time, it's cabin. Lots of cabin time, a lot of fishing, swimming, boating, pontooning, a little bit of drinking here and there. Some fun stuff.
Any crazy any crazy Spartan races or tough mudders, Teri? Just like, snuck in there, because I know you're a beast when it comes to those.
They are coming up here in this city. So I just got my notification about registering.
Wow.
There will be a super and a sprint here in the cities. So yes, that will be on the radar.
Amazing.
Get yourself a VP of Sales Enablement that can, they can run 10 miles through the mud. That seems like a required capability, as far as I'm concerned.
It's just like being in the trenches and sales, right? Right.
It's top of the resume.
Right.
Totally.
How about you, Pete? Summer highlights? What you got?
I've been doing a bunch of like business travel, which I really enjoyed. I know maybe that's like not the best answer, but like I've been able to go out to Atlanta, meet up with a bunch of our customers, been able to go out to New York. I'm actually in Austin right now at Sales Love conference. A bunch of Atrium customers are here and like partners as well. So it's fun. It's fun to get out. Although, the hotel kind of corporate art is like maybe leaves a little be desired, but like, that's okay. I'm not the fanciest person in the world. You can see I got my conference badge on here.
You just have to bring a poster so you can just put the fox behind you. Just put it on.
Just portable
on my hat.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect.
Love it.
Well, thank you so much. It looks like we had a good amount of folks join us, so we'll go ahead and get started today. Let us know where you're calling in from in the chat. We want to hear from you as always. Let's keep it nice and interactive, so feel free to pop in any messages you have for our speakers. So before we get into it too much, we will be talking harnessing your inner challenger. It's an amazing presentation that Teri has for us today. But first and foremost, I will risk pointing out the potentially obvious and let you know that today's event is indeed brought to you by Modern Sales Pros. So for those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest 27K plus highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and RevOps, sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. So our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they may not even know about. We do that through live sessions like this one that you'll get to see today. We have a robust online forum and quarterly summits, which I'll let you know just a bit more about in a second here. And we're getting back into in-person events. So keep an eye out for that one. We're really excited about it. If you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join shortly after this event. And as I mentioned, we do indeed have our October summit coming up. We're super excited to announce it. If you like this, you will love our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summits. This one is happening October 11th through the 13th. We've pulled together 24 events of amazing content and speakers. You can hear from the CEOs of ZoomInfo, Gainsight, Cowboy Ventures, and Winning by Design, as well as many sales leaders at Lattice, Pendo, Outreach, Atrium, and so much more. I'll be dropping that link to sign up in just a sec, so save your seat, get in there nice and early. And of course, today
I love how it's like CEO of like founders of Gong, ZoomInfo, Atrium.
Here, like we say it a little quieter.
It's like the same breath, It's gonna be an amazing, and also the theme is like so rad. It's Revenue Excellence Festival. It's like it's like it's like Coachella. It's a revenue festival. It's gonna be super fun. It's gonna be a lot of awesome people.
It's gonna be a great one. We're super excited about it, and gotta make it a little fun with the theme. So why not? All right, and with that, I will go ahead and pass to Pete to talk about our lovely sponsor of the day, Atrium. It is MSP's parent company. And Pete, go ahead, introduce yourself. I'll let you run the show from here with Teri, and I'll be back on at the end.
Killer. Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. I'm also the CRO. In short, Atrium makes what we call data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales managers, sales leaders, et cetera, use data to improve the performance of their reps and their team. And so the idea is just like to use metrics to be able to manage, measure, manage, improve rep performance by interpreting metrics and just helping everyone get better. It's what we do, and we do it with numbers. And what I'm really excited about hearing about today is how you can make your teams better through better enablement, which is something that I'm really passionate about, and I know that Teri is for sure. So that's a little bit on Atrium. I think that we can do a little bit of intros here. I just kind of mentioned I'm the founder of Atrium, and also was the founder of a previous software company called Talentpin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. Started Modern Sales Pros about 5 years ago, and also wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. So that's a little bit about me. But the reason why you're here is Teri, who is the VP of Global Enablement at CB Insights. Teri, you want to give yourself an introduction, help people understand, a little bit more about CB Insights and kind of like how you got to this point in your illustrious career?
I would love to. Thanks, Pete. I won't get into all of the nuances though, just because that's in one of the slides as part of the level set. So what I will tell you though is, yes, VP of Global Enablement, CB Insights. I've been there for about 1.5 years. I've been at several other organizations as well, enterprise as well as startup. CB Insights is all about providing insights into what is happening next. We're a very forward-looking data platform. We work with a variety of different organizations, VCs, all the way to large enterprises. And so, yes, today I'd love to share some insights around harnessing your inner challenger.
Awesome. And CB Insights has the world's coolest newsletter. Like if you're into tech at all, it's so good. It's hilarious. I mean, it's like hilarious, and of course, like educational and thoughtful, but also really funny.
And full of love. Full of love.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Awesome. Great. Okay, well, let's go ahead and kick off. First question, though, I have to ask you, Pete. Do you have any idea of when enablement actually became enablement? No cheating.
I honestly don't, because I mean, like we kind of contend with this in sales operations land a little bit, because like we work with managers and leaders, but also like sales operations has historically been responsible for providing kind of like metrical support and analytical support. And I think that like, maybe like 20 years ago or so, like it all kind of was like bundled together as like, like sales operations plus like maybe enablement, but maybe it was called training at the time, but it wasn't, it was more kind of like show up and sit in a conference room and kind of get talked at and whatever. So like, yeah, I'm not sure, but like not the modern enablement, that's more recent.
So theoretically, if you're going to actually go back in the research, it's 1999. That is when sales enablement was established as a function within the organizations. And 60% of organizations today actually have an enablement function. But what's really interesting, if we look at the next slide, is if we start looking at some of the data, 343% increase in sales enablement adoption in 5 years. $7.3 billion estimated value in 2028. But even more interesting, only 47% of teams are not measuring ROI. And so what's interesting about this and what it brings to mind for me is the housing bubble collapse. we have to look at it, is enablement setting itself up for failure? Are we getting into a sales enablement bubble? Because I look at all of the growth, I look at all of the people that show up here, I look at how much money is being invested in, there's enablement conferences all over. It's an explosion. But even with all of that investment that's happening, we're continuing to see declining levels of productivity in most organizations. So my interpretation of that is the foundation is rotten. And I really do believe that enablement leaders are partly to blame for that. We've really slipped into a relationship builder mode, which means more of an outside or an inside out approach. And so to solve for it, there really needs to be a shift in the thinking of the enablement leaders as well as sales leaders. And we have to start anchoring on strategy and revenue growth across the entire customer journey. So just to dig in a little bit to your previous question, Pete, if we move to the next slide, I started my career as a quota carrying rep. I was in project management. I've been in product marketing. I was actually in training, development, all of those things you talked about prior to kind of earning my wings into the enablement space. But I've been doing what I'm doing here as an enablement leader for almost 16 years now.
Wow.
Like you said, both the enterprise companies as well as startups. I have built out enablement functions from scratch now 3 times. And at the end of the day, I've seen the movie 5 times. I see how this is going. And so I'm sitting here looking and I go, so what is the shift? And the correlation that I think best depicts it is in the context of challenger versus relationship builder. And that is depiction of challenger methodology. But I'm not talking about the actual training on the methodology. I'm actually talking about learning from the research, the mental model that's just confirming that the challenger mindset is overwhelmingly a success. And if we can apply it to enablement, we'll start seeing that being successful as well.
I love it.
I love the smile on your face, Pete. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I was just reflecting on their comment previously about how, this is this idea of like a bunch of investment and then like tightening is like a fairly common pattern where it's like organizations find new toys. That new toy can be like a new capability, like enablement or fill in the blank or whatever, and they'll go kind of like hardcore on it, and then without kind of like refining it and saying, okay, cool, like what's the economic value here? And that's like a fairly it's like, I don't know, like weightlifters, right? It's like bulk and then cut and bulk and then cut. And then I think because so I think it's like a healthy thing because like otherwise you wouldn't want people not getting excited about something and investing, but it is an important part of like the natural process to say, okay, cool, this is great, but like what value is it delivering to the what value is it delivering to the business? And then moreover, like, is it being as effective as it could be? Because then if it's maybe not, because we're measuring it better now we're going to iterate our behavior a la the kind of challenger mindset you're talking about.
100%. Yeah, so let's jump into challenger mindset. Great transition. So there's a challenger, what I would call fingerprint here. And I look at it as, again, relationship builder versus challenger. So really, what's the difference? Reducing customer tension is what we do when we're in a relationship builder mode. We're really focused on, can we be accessible to the customers? I can work with anybody. I'm genuine. I have great relationships. We've seen those people all over the place. Whereas the challenger is building constructive tension. They're very focused on the teaching model of the teach, tailor, take control. If you haven't read it, great commercial teaching model, but it's getting to a point where you're coming in and offering unique perspectives. You're comfortable discussing things that are a little hairier, and you can do it in such a way where you're actually driving a more qualitative conversation. So let's dig in a little bit deeper, though, into how that applies to the mindset itself from an enablement perspective. So like we talked about, challenger enablement's the shift from more of this reactive order-taking smile sheet, as I call it, to one that's actually delivering business value. It's moving from something about delivering what sales leaders actually want to an enablement function that is understanding what the salespeople need and moving from our internal posture that's inside out to outside in. So if we're inside out, we're taking orders. We're doing whatever the leaders want, whatever the leaders ask. We're not thinking about how do we proactively do our job better. If we're outside in, we're bringing the new ideas to the table. We're challenging the way that things are being done or how people are thinking. And we are holding ourselves accountable and measuring the impact of our work, because we do have impact. Enablement has a major impact, and quantifying that impact puts enablement on the path to gain a seat at the table of influence. It's the ability for us to justify more headcount or help sales to drive further impact on related initiatives. But at the end of the day, it elevates the brand of enablement, not just holistically, but also you as an enablement leader.
Yeah, I think this again kind of feels fairly akin to some of the kind of transitions that are happening in like revenue operations, where it's like the metaphor that I like to use is like, who's the tail and who's the dog, like who's wagging who.
Right.
And I think the important thing is just like recognizing like sales managers, even like sales leaders, right? Like they're not like educators by background, right? And that's okay, right? Like I mean, we see this with Atrium all the time. You know, most managers are promoted, account executives are promoted SDRs or whatever. So you have like, 20, 26, 28, 30, 32-year-old, professional who, one, may not have the most managerial experience, and certainly hasn't been like explicitly trained associated, and they certainly have not been trained to do analytical interpretation. That's kind of like where we end up helping quite a bit. But what we also find is that like the managers are just like, they don't necessarily know what to coach on. So having having someone to help them to say, hey, across your whole team or across your whole organization, we are observing a pipeline hygiene problem as indicated by an undesirable number of untouched opportunities. This seems to be a widespread problem. I understand that you think that like, some competitive kill sheet or some competitive training is like the thing that's like, top of your mind or what have you. However, looking at this, we are observing that this seems to be the high order bit. So we're going to have the organization do push-ups on this, and then maybe we'll get to secondary priorities.
Yes. That I couldn't have said that better myself. That was actually very well said. Yeah.
We see it a bit. I'm sure
you do. And I know that.
Yeah.
And actually, this is again perfect segue into the 5 deadly sins of what I would consider enablement, but could be applied across any leadership role within a sales organization. And so if we look at the challenger model as not just a story of salespeople, we can actually take a little bit of journey looking into my own personal experiences. And I am happy to share my mistakes to help empower everybody else on this call and other calls to just make sure that these are things you're looking for and how to have a different conversation or a different way of looking at it. So let's jump into deadly sin number 1, which is assuming activity means growth. I love this one. My first role in the enablement space was at an enterprise org, and the sales managers were very, very quick to assert their opinion based on, hey, we've got this perception of the field, and I want to prescribe you exactly what I want you to do in your enablement role, aka inside out enablement. Not knowing any differently, because I'm very new into this space, I am eager to jump in. Hey, my VP of sales said, go do this. I'm going to do that. And so we went back and we're quickly solving for these requests that have come in. We're creating our smile sheets. And I'm going to tell you, they were really pretty. We counted assets. We counted downloads. We counted completed trainings. But if you notice, we didn't spend any time asking a question, which is very important. Why? So any discovery around what is happening in the field, what are we truly looking to solve for? What are the milestones that are important? What's the root cause? Like, we did none of that. And so this perception over here about reps being active or completing trainings or certified, and us coming back and saying, hey, look at, we solved for it because we counted all of these things and we looked at the logins and we looked at who's been onboarded. Again, it's not that those things aren't important, and they are a piece of the story. They're a data point, but that is not the way that we're going to solve for where we need to impact from an enablement. So really, I went and took all that information, if we look ahead, and I said, hey, here's my fancy smile sheet. Suddenly the SVP of sales walks in and he's like, Teri, that is great. You want to move to the next slide, actually? But he said, that is great. But here's my question. What does that actually mean? And how do any of these metrics actually demonstrate any correlation to revenue growth? And hey, how are you going to quantify this? And I did literally look like a deer in the headlights. I'm sure if there was a mirror or camera, I was scared because my next thought was, oh my gosh, I don't know. And so as we progressed, and ironically, we're going through some challenger type trainings as we move forward in the slide deck, I actually realized that I could apply what I had learned from Challenger into this enablement focus. So I just made this conscious decision at that point in time years ago to say, I'm not an order taker anymore. I need to be more Challenger focused, and I need to focus on this insight. I need to bring something unique, this new provocative perspective. I need to come to the table with ideas about how am I going to make money, save money, or mitigate risk. And so really having a better sense of how to finely tune these individual objectives and the value drivers, this became my passion. That's what I wanted to work on. And so while not doing it in an aggressive way, but in an assertive way, I got more comfortable at just having that tension and having some of those conversations with leadership so that I could press them. But what was even more interesting is even as I continued to press and move forward with this, I actually saw that we are quickly moving into what I would call the second deadly sin, which is follow the shiny penny. So again, the SVP of sales and the VP of enablement at another large organization came to the conclusion that the only way, they were like, Teri, the only way we're going to fix the organization is if we invest and roll out a sales methodology. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm a sales methodology believer. We've rolled out many different sales methodologies. They're all fantastic. They're not a one size fits all though. And before I could even blink, the ink was dry on the check for over $1 million investment.
Oh,
and
goodness.
I sat there in just complete disbelief. And I started asking questions. And quite honestly, that is one of my favorite things to do. I love asking questions. What was the problem we're trying to solve here? How do we know that that's the problem in the first place? What have we done to solve it to date? How are we measuring the success of it? What other stakeholders did you bring into the conversation? Which reps did we talk to? What do they believe the issues are? And there was silence across the board. I could not get anyone to answer my question. And it was so incredibly frustrating. And the response that I got was, I don't know, Teri, it's just what they said we should do.
Yeah,
So,
I feel that happens a lot. I mean, like I have empathy for that from a sales leadership standpoint. The kind of like one of the other things, it's kind of like do something, right?
Yes.
The less aggressive version of that is like, oh, we need to like change all of our stages or something, right?
Yeah,
Which and without like kind of actually inspecting what the actual, or like inspecting and then interpreting what the kind of like the core problem might be.
Right.
And I feel that like part of this is the result of a lot of organizations they want to hire a sales leader to like come in and do it again, right? Like just do it again, not recognizing the fact that every organization's go to market and like the way that their product fits them, like every organization's go to market is different. Like the way that the product fits the market, the dynamics of the market, the competitive landscape, the maturity of the product, the maturity of the market, all those sort of things, like those are like the puzzle pieces that impact like the smoothness or the non-smoothness of how easily you can take something to market. And so if you're just trying to do it again, oftentimes you're gonna run into problems there. How long had the organization, or how long had the sales leader been in seat before he or she kind of pulled the trigger on this?
A little over a year.
Okay.
And again, this is, having been at organizations, this is not unfamiliar, and I know, like you said, it's not unfamiliar to you, but I do think we get too quick to pull the trigger on these things, and we don't spend time. I'll put a plug for Atrium, looking at the data, really looking at the data and asking questions to get to a better point of view before we go decide that, hey, it's a new sales process, it's a new lead score, it's a new sales methodology. Because again, all wonderful things and things that we do need, but those are really quick things to just say, hey, let's just do this and let's just see if it sticks.
Right.
It's just a tough one. And so, this really led me to think about, hey, what's in my span of control? And so in this situation, I spent a lot of time working with my team to ensure that we were going to hold an outside in posture, and really focused on how do we lead by example. And the way that we can do that is with the 5 whys. And so if we look at the 5 whys, Sakichi Toyota, he's and probably everybody already knows about this. He's a Japanese industrialist. He's an inventor. He developed this technique actually back in the 1930s, and it became incredibly popular in the 1970s, and Toyota still uses it today. They have this go and see philosophy. So essentially that means that decision making is based on in-depth understanding about what's actually happening on the shop floor versus what did somebody in the boardroom actually say might be happening. And this is true to the tradition. It's the most effective way, in my perspective, again, to find the kind of answers you need from the people who have hands-on experiences with that process or the problem that's in question. And so my method was very simple. When a problem occurs, team, we need to drill down to the root cause. I want you to ask why 5 times, 10 times if you have to. Wait, what is the countermeasure? The countermeasure becomes apparent, and then you start following to prevent the issue from reoccurring. It was a little bit of an interesting mix here, because my team was like, Teri, we love this. But a few of my less tenured reps were incredibly hesitant. And the response was, I really feel like I'm pushing back, and I don't want to go into a leadership meeting or meet with the managers, frontline managers, and start questioning them. But my response, and I can very much appreciate that, was, listen, remember the source of your authority. You were hired to do this job because you had this experience. If they had that information, they'd be doing the job themselves. So you still need to be empathetic and respectful, but you need to start following this process about how can I continue to add value? Because as we all know, comfort is the enemy of growth. So it was, hey, let's get uncomfortable.
I feel that that's oftentimes tough. Like I contend with this with my reps all the time. So Teri and I have this like Punch and Judy show where we talk about how sales management is largely just sales, and kind of what we're talking about right here, of course, is like enablement. It's like all human interaction is like largely sales, right? And so we run into this with our reps quite a bit, where they know a ton about data-driven sales management, right? Like, because that's all they do all day long, right? They have like 2, 3, 4 customer facing meetings. And like one of the things with Atrium is we actually sell on customer data. So you can like just turn on an Atrium account in like a couple of minutes, and boom, you've got this crazy like world-class analytics harness. So our reps are like guiding managers and leaders and what have you through their own data. Some of our reps are like 26, 28, 30 years old or what have you. And so having the backbone to talk to a 40-something or 50-something year old VP of sales or like head of sales operations or what have you, and kind of point out, like a substantial deficit in the organization or an issue with respect to this rep right here, in a way that like A, can land,
Mm-hmm.
B, is like doesn't paper over it, but actually it's like challenges and says like, hey, like what we found across our customers is that patterns that look like this, like let's use the pipeline hygiene thing, like
Yeah.
it would appear that there's a broad issue of pipeline hygiene across this, across the team here, that seems like it's coming from opportunity overloadedness, right? You can see that
Mm-hmm.
all these reps have like 80 ops in their pipe. That can kind of like, that can make a rep kind of shrink. And you can imagine a sales enablement professional, especially one who doesn't have a background of like actually being a seller his or
Yeah.
herself, which is an advantage that you have, can maybe like blanch at that and be like, oh, okay, cool, like, oh, what are you talking about, like you don't know, like you're just a sales
Mm-hmm.
trainer or whatever. How do you recommend that folks kind of surmount that kind of challenge so they can actually be a partner and push on the managers and leadership? Is it just like less professional development, or what are kind of ways that you would recommend there?
So I do a lot of role playing with my team.
Love it.
Can you tell the sales is coming out?
Yeah.
We actually do. We do a lot of role playing, and I do that with sales managers as well, having them role play as far as, we'll take different scenarios that they're dealing with, some of their direct reports. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's practice what could this sound like, and helping them understand how it's presented. Is it presenting well? Like you said, is it landing? Is there a clear call to action? What does that follow-up look like? How are we going to measure whether or not it actually did in fact land? As far as my team goes, it's a learning curve. And whether it's enablement, speaking to, like you said, a VP of enablement or VP of sales, it's just learning to immerse yourself in the information. I also encourage my team to ask a lot of questions. Nobody expects anyone to know everything. I would certainly hope. I don't know everything. I don't want to know everything. And if I want to be in a room with people that know a ton more than I do, because I want to learn. And so anchoring on that idea of, be a learner and ask a lot of questions. And if you don't understand, then ask another question so you can get to a point in time where you do start understanding. Because that's, for me, I really respect that approach. I think a lot of people actually respect that approach versus not understanding and just walking away and going, it doesn't matter anyhow. So
I love that about the role playing. I think that's like, because man, it's so funny. It's like, because you ought to do this with your reps, right? Like we do this with our reps when, okay, cool, like you said that, a little bit off here, say it this way right here, I'm going to model it for you, and then I want you to say it back to me. Okay, great. Now I'm going to model it for you. I want you to say it back to me. Now I want you to say it. Now I want you to say it 20 times in a row without me. Like just go and groove the muscle memory.
right.
And so you could imagine doing that with like managers, just or sales enablement folks, be like, cool, so this is the talk track that you're going to use in order to observe a potential problem to a manager that you're assisting.
Right. Yeah. And we had talked about this before on a separate call, but what we're doing with our sales managers, our frontline managers, is I run a series with them, and we have evolving topics. So every other week we go through a different topic. But during that call with all of the frontline managers across the org, BD, AE, CS, we actually do those role plays. And then we have some one-on-ones depending on who's asking for more help. And they'll just come to a call with me, and it'll be, here's the situation.
Personalized coaching.
It's been, it's
personalized meta coaching, personalized coaching of the coaches.
Yes. It's huge, hugely impactful. Takes time, but hugely impactful. So, I think, to my point, it's all about getting uncomfortable, and, ironically leads us into the next deadly sin, which is reactive enablement. So if we look at what that is, I give a lot of coaching as well to my team, where I say, hey, listen, when you show up for your first day on the job and you are new into the enablement role, maybe you're an enablement leader, and it's quarterly annual kickoff, let's say, your leaders are going to come to you and they're going to say, okay, great. Here's your 5 top priorities.
Yep.
They ask you to go buy a tool. They want you to roll out a training. They want you to build X. the thing is, do not be reactive. Don't succumb to this inside out posture. And sales leaders are exactly the same. I would encourage all leaders to have this posture, carry the mindset, and go out and do a listening tour. So I stepped into a new leadership role at a company and was faced with the exact same scenario. However, when the CRO came to me and said, here's everything I want you to do, I've got my list, I said, fantastic. I appreciate all of the insight. However, I'm going to respectfully ask that you give me a few weeks to go and do a listening tour. I need to gather some context. I need to get some frontline information so I can come back with a strong point of view and recommend some next steps. And in that instance, that's what I did. And it was 3 weeks of talking to over 130 different people in the organization, frontline reps through customer success. And I only asked 2 questions. What's working? What's not working? That was it. Those are the only questions I asked. And it's very interesting what happens when you come in and you give people a safe place to say, listen, I'm anonymizing the conversation. Your name's not going towards anything here. I just want a real answer. And in that time, I filled up 3.5 journals of notes, so much feedback. But what it did for me is it gave me an opportunity to go back, and I was able to identify key themes and then put those themes into categories, organize that by urgent, short, and long term. And then I knew that I could go back and say, hey, the truth is somewhere here in the middle, but I have the field's confidence and trust now. They actually, they're looking to find a solution for X, Y, and Z. And now I can cross connect what I'm hearing from you for CRO. That allowed me to go in and have a much stronger conversation. I was presenting findings, a strong point of view. What are the resources we need? What are the investments I'm recommending? How are we going to measure this? And it actually, most importantly, shifted the mindset of the leadership team, because the perceptions they had based on the boardroom conversations was so vastly different than what we found on the shop floor. So
discovery.
Deep discovery. Can't stress it enough. And so, that's really tied into our 4 or 5 deadly sins, which is the preconceived notions. We also went through an exercise when I was told, hey, guess what? Our SDR team isn't working. They're not working, Teri. Okay. The leadership believed that they purposefully were not working their territories. They said marketing's got the wrong lead scoring. There's tons of problems. This perception is like, you just need to drive harder accountability. We need to remap the lead scoring. And so pretty quickly, I was like, okay, great. I need to go gain agreement, change into more of a challenger mindset. We need to do a listening tour. We need to do more of the 5 whys. And again, what was interesting and what we uncovered was so incredibly different than what the leaders thought. This is going to paralyze you, Pete, so don't fall off your chair. But
oh, goodness.
The SDRs didn't know what MQL stood for.
Sure.
They had no idea. They're like, I don't know. And then
what's the definition? Was it ever declared, right? Was it shared with them? No, I get it.
It wasn't. And even more important, the why, like, why is an MQL important and what do I do in an MQL? And again, these things for people that have been in sales role or sales leader, we just take this stuff for granted. We just assume people coming in know, and they didn't. But
that's not fair to like a 23-year-old, right?
No, because so many of them were just coming out of college. They're living in their parents' basements post-COVID, during COVID. Honestly, we had so much awareness into some were just lacking basic work skills, basic work life skills that our generation, we've learned because we were in offices and we were shadowing. We had different experiences
via
that we were able
osmosis.
to Yes. And so they were struggling with prioritizing their day. They didn't have strong discovery skills. They didn't know how their activity directly impacted how they hit quota. It was like, well, I don't know. What you want me to do? How many calls? And so getting people to take a step back and go, okay, fundamentally, we need to start with the why. Simon Sinek, start with the why. And so to solve for all of this, we ended up going back and creating an SDR playbook, and that became their quote unquote Bible. So everything they needed to know to be effective in their role, it was their playbook. It had everything about executing their day, frameworks for what your time slot should look like, what can you move, definitions of MQLs, SQOs, leads, sequences, all the distance, system workflows. And what we saw was such an overwhelming success, because once their confidence started to increase, it was like, oh, now I understand why I'm doing this, and I understand how to do it. It was just all the specific actions were now correlating back to some goal. And so now they had their roadmap, and they weren't just winging it anymore. So it was a huge opportunity for leadership to look at things differently.
I think that, like, I don't know, I'm kind of like, not to be too weird about this, but like I'm kind of getting like a little emotional about like the story that you said there, because what, like, I think we as leaders need to be like empathetic, like way more empathetic with respect to our staff, and like look at it from the standpoint. I had this really phenomenal conversation with this amazing sales leader, Emily Carpenter. She was on Power Hour last Friday, and she was talking about servant leadership and how she works for her team, and like I'm really at the bottom and what have you, and like I think about the negative impacts of not doing this approach that you're talking about here. Like, oh, well, that's because they're like, goofing off, playing Fortnite or whatever, instead of like, doing XYZ. Now, there might be some folks who are doing that, but there might be other folks who are just like, adrift, right? Like they don't know. And I'll give you an example. So we have like a 10-person SDR organization. We have like 15 sellers at Atrium, and like, I think it's like 9 SDRs or what have you. And we had this SDR who, their performance was really lagging with respect to opportunity creation in their ramp. And there was like a pretty substantial concern there, because like what was weird was like the activity was there, but like, the email responsiveness wasn't there. So like these are all like Atrium metrics that were being monitored by the software. And so as we were kind of on the verge of potentially, pipping this SDR, and then it turned out, but like we dug in like a little bit more and noticed that, it, like the frequency of interaction with the accounts that the SDR did have was quite high. Like, they were like working the heck out of their accounts, and they were multi-threading appropriately, but there just weren't as many accounts. We have like a largely inbound model because we do a bunch of content. And so then it was kind of like, okay, well, like this rep is like doing the work against the things that are coming into their pipe, so to speak, right? Their SDR pipe. What's going on? And what we ended up realizing was that like our round robining system was actually screwed up. And this rep was getting about 50% the number of leads that the other SDRs were getting. And so like it took us, to your point about like 5 whys, if we had just like thrown up our hands and been like, cool, this person's like never going to make it, et cetera, et cetera. But by like double clicking a couple times into a couple different metrics, we were able to kind of figure out like the will is there, and like, the skill seems to be there. Seems like something else is going on here. And like, lo and behold, it was like, oh, well, there's like something wrong with this like assembly line, versus someone where it's just like, okay, cool. Like you're not doing any activity, and all of your accounts that are assigned to you are untouched. And like, okay, cool. Like that's obviously like a will problem right there.
Right.
Yeah. So like, and now that SDR is like a top performing SDR for our team. And like, we were really like, and because I fear to think about like what could have happened if we were not as data driven as we are, because we would have missed out on this great SDR, and the SDR would have missed out on a great role as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great story. Yes. Huge. I mean, it's a huge opportunity. And like I've said, it takes effort. It takes time. It's not just a quick fix. So, giving the data a chance to speak and looking at both sides of the equation, the skill, the will is huge. And so like in that vein, let's talk about the last deadly sin, which is just wing it, because there's a correlation right there. Fail to plan to fail. I actually like it said a little bit different. Prior proper planning prevents poor performance. I'd love to see in the chat if anybody knows that saying. That saying is actually a military saying. I have military in the family, and it was something that my dad drilled into me very, very young. Still to this day, as he says, Teri Bear, prior proper planning prevents poor performance. Okay, Dad. It's true though. It's true, and we talk a lot about that at work because it's an easy step into the enablement function, and so easy to think, oh my gosh, I've got this. I don't need a roadmap. I've got experience. I've been doing this for 10 years, right? But I thought that same thing too, and then something really amazing happened. One of my mentors, while we were meeting, said, hey, Teri, like, how are you going to achieve more of a repeatable, scalable, measurable result? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's a really good question. So what would you recommend? Where do I start? And he said, Teri, you need to start at the beginning. You need to create a charter. And so I went through an exercise of very long weeks, days, hours of creating and defining my enablement charter. What is my view of the enablement ecosystem? How do I identify what are the objectives of the function? What are the outcomes that are associated with those? And correlating all of those back to very specific performance metrics so that we could use that to go back and use as our roadmap. And I was able to then go back and measure our overall success in the enablement space and the enablement impact on revenue growth. So that exercise was fundamentally a major mindset shift for me. And I encourage anybody, whether it's sales, whether it's enablement, whether it's a people team, making sure you have your charter and you understand all of those elements is so incredibly important. Because if we look at story selling as it relates to charters, what you then can do is have a much better conversation with your executive leadership team. I can't go in and say enablement directly impacted a $3 million increase in pipeline. I can't say that. That's okay. Nobody's expecting me to say that. What they're expecting, though, is for me to show how enablement helped support that increase in pipeline. What were the programs? What were the results of those programs? And this conversation is a much different conversation than anything else because, like we all talk about, it's how do I earn a seat at the table? It requires me to have a shift in my mindset and a shift in my approach. The thing about challenger enablement as I look kind of forward is the next year is really going to be about when enablement shifts its focus from this key performance indicator business, forecast accuracy, sales efficiency, sales productivity. Each KPI, underpins this predictability, this positive measurable growth. And most of the programs are focused on leading indicators such as the butts in seats, the content consumed. And few have actually shifted over towards the secondary outcome. And the reality is the board, the investors, senior leadership, they're all looking for predictability in their business. I know my CRO is looking for that. Those are the conversations he has with me. And so they want to know that an investment in the sales and marketing teams will lead to a specific revenue output. Right. They also want to have confidence that we're going to hit the target when they're giving a revenue projection. But that's where enablement specifically, or anybody in a leadership role, has to start taking ownership of that challenge and really tying your efforts back to predictability and working with key leaders to support the outcomes. So, shifting that focus is what earns enablement that coveted seat at the executive table. And it shifts enablement to more of that strategic role that it's long desired to be.
I like it. I think everybody raise your right hand and repeat after me. We will be challengers.
Matt Dixon will be very happy. We will be challenged.
We will be challengers. This is fantastic, Teri. I really appreciate it. I mean, I think that there's a lot and I think, look, not every sales organization is lucky enough to have, a Teri and I forget how many helpers you have, but it's a few. And
Yeah.
like that's super rad. I think a lot of organizations, unfortunately don't have that capability. And so a lot of this stuff is like, either a single sales enablement person
Mm-hmm.
or devolved, right? It's a slice of the manager's work or a slice of the of the leader's
Right.
job. But I think these things, still apply, right? Where it's like, hey,
Yeah.
what is the thing that we're trying to solve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we trying to certify people? Are we trying to raise win rates?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
raise win rates. Oh, okay, got it. Cool. So like, what are the actions that we're gonna do in order
Mm-hmm.
to address that versus kind
Yeah.
of like going through the motions? And I think that can apply. One, it can apply to non-enablement people. Two,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't just apply across the entire organization. Ideally, and this is something that I talk about quite a bit in my data-driven sales coaching class, or masterclass, is can you do it on a per rep basis?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Can you specifically see like, hey, this rep right here has a win rate issue, and specifically
Mm-hmm.
a win rate issue with respect to these upmarket customers, right? Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, cool. Let's coach that specific thing versus this rep over here. He's just got like a pipeline hygiene problem. He's kind of messy and he needs a different thing
Yeah.
applied to him. But like kind of thinking about like diagnosing the issue, ideally
Mm-hmm.
metrically, and then the prescription, the kind of like the get well plan, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
needs to be tied specifically to that, as opposed to going through the motions, right? Like
Yeah.
what is the metric that we're going to improve there? Again, kind of like sales, like what is the med pick here? What is the
Mm-hmm.
metric that we're going to positively impact with respect to this rep or this team that we're trying to
Yeah.
coach?
I love what you said, because the reality is this is not just an enablement framework. These are not enablement thoughts. These are things that we talk about with our frontline managers, because even just doing one of them and getting the managers to start thinking a little bit differently can make a significant difference. And even, you made the point of, yes, I have a team now, but when I started out, I've had a couple organizations where it was just me. And so you can't do all of this. And that's the beauty of putting all of these things together, is this is what I've learned over the years. And so again, unless you have more people, you're going to, again, have to pick and choose, where's the priority? Where can I have the biggest impact in the organization? It's a huge learning curve. And I've had insanely good partnerships with all of the leaders I've worked with. And they're the ones that really help you when you are a single army in that light. But even if you don't have an enablement team, taking these concepts and applying them is a great opportunity to just make some pretty significant shift.
Yeah. Well, we have a few minutes left here, so if folks have questions for Teri or myself, please do drop them in the chat or in the Q&A panel there, because you have this illustrious enablement professional at your disposal here. I think one thing that I might ask is, how do you kind of like, because this notion of being an internal service provider, which is what enablement and also sometimes operations is viewed as, going from being viewed as a order taker, like you were saying,
Yes.
to someone who is providing like a healthy kind of like tension back and forth. This
Yeah.
is like one of the things I talk about on my teams. I'm like, you should always be like seeking to have tension kind of in both directions. Like it's kind of like SDR AE handoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or AE CSM handoff. Like you want there to be like
Mm-hmm.
a healthy amount of tension, right? Not an
Yes.
unhealthy amount of tension.
Yes.
But you can imagine a similar thing going on. And so what are some of the ways that you might recommend to kind of like navigate that, since that's like a new behavior of like getting out of the order taking mindset and more
Yeah.
into the kind of like challengery outside in mindset?
So awesome question, because my current team asked me that same thing many times. They're getting used to it. So a few things I encourage them to do. First, whenever you're asked to, hey, create this, we need that, whatever it is, the first thing that you need to ask is, what are you trying to solve for? And just that question alone is going to get you a no response. I don't know what we're trying to solve for. or somebody who has actually thought about it and can articulate exactly, this is what we're trying to solve for and this is why. So that's the first thing. I also have 2 other favorite things that I encourage them to ask, because we're very, again, and I wasn't always like this. You know, I've had to learn how to navigate myself, getting comfortable having more of this constructive tension in my conversations with leaders, because it is intimidating and scary sometimes. But being able to go in and say, help me understand. That's another one of my favorite. Help me understand. 1, because everybody likes to help. And 2, when you ask somebody to help you understand something, you're asking to be a learner. So that's also one thing I coach the reps on. That question alone can be fundamentally game changing on your call with a prospect. But internally, ask the question, help me understand. And then getting, like we were talking about earlier, we do have different tools we use in enablement. So we can do intake sheets. So newer enablement team members, I'll actually have them go through an intake process where they have all of the questions, similar to sales. It's like, this is the discovery you need to do with, you know, the different leaders. And this is why we need the information, so that we can come back and we can present something, a proposal for, you know, how to solve this and where we think we can impact it. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because the other uncomfortable conversation to have with people is, great, we did it, but 1, we don't know how to measure it. 2, we don't have any reinforcement. So basically it just becomes, you know, another book on the shelf, whatever it was. And, you know, I don't want to spend my time doing that. Nobody likes to spend their time doing that, but it's building that muscle. It's getting confident and starting. It's just starting to do it. It's just starting to try to have that conversation.
I love it. Excellent. Oh, hi, Joni. Our boss is here.
Hi.
What's
Thank
up?
you so much. That was amazing. How are we
Wonderful.
feeling?
Great. I always come away inspired to be a better leader and manager after hanging out with Teri. So it's my it's my monthly constitutional leadership constitutional managerial constitutional.
Amazing.
Nice.
I was gonna say, I think we can all agree Terry's a natural. So thank you so much. Any final notes from either of you before we wrap up here?
I think we're good to go. I'm just super excited about our Revenue Excellence Summit. So I'm pumped to, you know, we're going to have like 30 conversations with like amazing sales leaders and founders of modern sales companies. So it's going to be super exciting.
Yes. We love the name of it, by the way. Love it. Great marketing.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Teri. We really enjoyed having you here today. And of course, thank you, Pete, as always. And thank you to Atrium for sponsoring. I'll be sending you all a little follow-up email here in a bit. If you want to rewatch it, if you want the key takeaways, any of the good stuff. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Nice.
Bye. See you.
Thanks, Joni.